Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming to the conference this year. This is our last hour of sessions. So we have 2 others going on at the same time. If you didn't catch any of the sessions, all the recordings will be posted on Sked within the week. So you can go back and watch them at any point in time. Also, all the presentations. So if you want to take notes or if you want to go back and remember some of the slides, they're all linked on Sked. I think there's 2 or 3 that are missing, but we're working with those speakers to get them uploaded. So go ahead, download those, print those off, and you can access those at any point in time. But today we're here with Mark Grinberg. He's going to talk about coaching Coxswains. Mark is the Riverside High Performance Group head coach. And again, he's going to be focusing on Coxswains today. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I think Mark's going to use the chat for some things as well, but let's focus the questions in the Q&A, and then I'll go ahead and ask throughout. So we'll ask them as we get them. But other than that, Mark, thank you so much for being here and enjoy.
Thanks so much, Sarah. So again, my name's Mark Grinberg. My presentation is not on the schedule because it's a little too big. So I'm working with Sarah to get it up. It's a huge presentation with a lot of media and a lot of video, hence why we're doing Coxswain stuff. So we have lots of video in it. And so I just want to make sure that you guys have my email there in case you need it to get the presentation from me. If you want it quickly right after the conference, I'm happy to send it over to you guys in some way. But again, my name is Mark Grinberg. I've been coaching quite a while here. My current role is the high performance group coach at Riverside Boat Club. There, my role is to kind of coach up athletes who are preparing for world championships and Olympic Games and international competition. So that right now is primarily a group of lightweight and open weight rowers, men and women, who are all sort of like training for worlds, hoping for worlds this summer, hoping that sort of this pandemic allows us to have a world championship. We haven't had one in a few years, but that's my role. I don't work with many Coxswains in my role right now, but prior to this role, past 10 years or so, I've been coaching high school junior programs with lots and lots of Coxswains, and I myself am a Coxswain still, and I was a Coxswain as well in college. So I have lots of things to talk about today. So I think we should just jump right into it. The goal today is to empower coaches to develop Coxswains into effective leaders who add boat speed and are an extension of the coach/team's mission. So what that means for us today is really just making sure that we are building up our Coxswains and making sure that they're not just the sort of like mini me's in the boat. So going through our agenda, we're going to talk about whether coxing is subjective or objective. And then we're going to talk about methods for coaching Coxswains, both real-time and post-row, talk about Coxswain selection, and then we'll have plenty of winter, early spring takeaways. I love all these presentations because they're always great with giving you some takeaways for right now. And then I'm going to give you guys lots of time at the end for specific questions. I know that there are a lot of Coxswains, current Coxswains on this call right now. So I want to make sure that I give you guys plenty of time for questions that maybe relate to just coxing in general, if we have a wider interest in that as well. So just like I said, the first thing we're going to talk about is developing Coxswains. It's really important that your Coxswains, whether you're a coach or a Coxswain yourself, that you aren't just the mini me in the boat. You know, it's so much more than that. We're trying to develop Coxswains that are more than just, you know, the mini me in the boat and just parroting back what coaches are saying. So there are a few things that we think about when we're coaching Coxswains and when we are Coxswains. But one of the big things that people talk about is the fact that the best Coxswain is the one that you don't notice. And I want to sort of step away from that a little bit, because as we get into, you know, what makes a good Coxswain, how we coach our Coxswains to become that sort of ideal or that role, it really is so much more than that. But let's start with this. What are some of your biggest frustrations with Coxswains, you know, coaches especially? Let's or Coxswains, if you think that there are frustrations that your coaches have with you, let's throw those in the chat real quick. I'll give you guys a minute, and then in a second here we can talk about what's hard about being a Coxswain. But for right now, if you have any frustrations with your Coxswains or difficulties coaching Coxswains, let's throw those into the chat real quick. Okay, I'm not seeing much pop in. Maybe we're all, not being prepared for practice. Okay, yeah, okay, great. Making time to actually teach them. Yeah, attitude, power play. These are all great, awesome. Yeah, so much good stuff coming in really fast. Awesome. Repetitiveness. Yep. Slow to make decisions on the water. Yeah, so that's really good. What I'm looking for here too is a lot of like frustration around, like, people have all this frustration with, you know, okay, my coxswain hit this thing or wasn't exercising safely. What coxswains in the room, what do you guys find are your frustrations? What's hard to be about being a coxswain? Or if you're a coach, what do you think is hard about being a coxswain? Aren't part of the crew. Yep. Expecting to know what hasn't been taught. Yep, that's great. Huge number of inputs to process quickly. Bombarded with info. We're going to talk about that. That's a great point. Yep, fully understanding of the role. Yep, this is great stuff. Awesome. Yeah, so obviously as a coach, there are a lot of frustrations and a lot of difficulties to coaching coxswains, but it's also hard to become a coxswain. And, you know, like, as coxswains, it's really hard to get through being a coxswain and to get through a day-to-day practice. There's so many challenges and you have such a big role on the team. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today and sort of transition into here is trying to be empathetic of our coxswains and to create empathetic coxswains. So trying to feel, you know, what's hard and difficult about being a coxswain, but also as a coxswain, understand that, you know, we have to develop empathy with our coaches and develop empathy and understanding with our rowers. And that's really kind of part and parcel to being a good coxswain, is having that feeling of empathy and understanding everyone's feelings around us. So, you know, one big thing to remember as we get into this as well is that most rowers spend more time listening to coxswains than coaches. So if your coxswains are ineffective teachers, if they're not effective at sort of communicating out what the team idea is, it's going to be really hard for them to get through being a good coxswain and get through your practices. So really thinking about that as you sort of like get through a lot of this stuff. So I want to start out with this. This is my favorite football team, the New England Patriots. This is a few years ago, but
he knew before that snap that he was throwing that football to the running back based on who was guarding the fullback.
So as we're watching this, just think about what's going on here, and I'm going to narrate a little bit for you.
An indicator of man-to-man coverage.
So Tom Brady is the quarterback here behind the offense, and he
as did rookie linebacker
his athletes,
Alex Anzalone.
His running back are lining up in man-to-man coverage.
Safety Kenny Vaccaro shadowed Rob Gronkowski
that they're
as
covering.
the Chiefs' Eric Berry had in Week 1.
And what he's going to do is see that before the ball is even started,
before the ball is even
snapped to him. And he sees the matchup that he wants.
One-on-one with the rookie linebacker.
And then gets that before the play is even.
Brady knows where he's throwing before the snap even. He doesn't even have to read coverage. They win before the snap based on formation. It's really, really intelligent.
So we're going to watch another video here in a second, but I want you guys thinking, like, what if your coxswains were able to do that? What is that? That's sort of, in my mind, the biggest idea of what makes a great coxswain, is being able to go from that, you know, just coaching practice and getting through, you know, running a workout and running through getting the boat safely, to making that next step of looking over at the opposing boat with, you know, 700 meters left, seeing that the other boat's catches are starting to fail and being like, oh, this is my moment of when I'm going to take that 10 and get through this and move through that boat. So with that, let's watch through the next video that I want to see. Yeah, everybody can see. Okay, should be able to see my screen here. I'm just going to share it one more time so everybody can see what's going on. Here we go. Awesome. And this is one of my favorite rowing videos, and it's World Cup 2 from 2014. But I'll let it speak for itself.
Does seem like it's a bit of a long-term injury.
Think about that football video.
And now we move to the final of the women's 8. 5 teams competing here. So there was a race for lanes, which the US didn't do because they had all 4 women in the women's pair final this morning. Sorry, all 8 women in the women's pair final this morning.
So as you probably heard, the
Becca,
U.S.
Becca.
women in this event have had all 4 women at
Fifth
the
to
World
notice,
Cup, so
she
you're
is
allowed
the
to fill them
European
up.
champion
The women
in
the
the
USA
pair, of
here
course,
have
when
spent,
Heather
the
Stanning
morning
came
rowing
back
their
It's a
pairs.
big ask, doubling up.
for this race.
Pause it real quick. They've spent the morning rowing a world championship final where I believe they were 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 6th in the pairs, in the women's pairs. Don't quote me on that, but they were all in the A final of the women's pairs, all the women in the 8. Coach Terhar, their coach, broke down the 8 into 4 pairs. They all made the final. And then, a few hours later, they are in the final of the women's 8, running an unbeaten streak for, I believe at this point, it was 9 years. I think they talk about it in the video, but I'll watch through with this. And again, we're just trying to think about how this relates to that first video that we watched of Tom Brady and the Patriots, and where the call gets made here, and how the boat picks up.
It's a big ask, doubling up, especially all 8 athletes. What they'll find is that they really struggle for power here, probably in the early stages, and I would expect in the second 500 there's going to be a serious burn. But the Canadians, who are also one of the favourite teams, have had 6 of their women double up as well, so certainly in that respect it's fairly even. But it'll be interesting to see how the US goes. Certainly the favourites, as you mentioned, Martin, but they'll be feeling the pinch in the second 500.
Yeah, it's the Canadian bows at the top of your screen in the white boat that you see out in front at the moment. The Canadians, well, not as many of them have raced as the Americans, but 4 of their crew have raced earlier today. 4 are fresh, so perhaps that's no surprise. Any time the Canadians can beat the Americans will be a big deal, though.
Absolutely, and they're really going for it in this first 500 metres. I think that they would know going into this race that the Americans would be suffering with a little bit of a loss of power after doing that pair race. So certainly giving it to them in the first half of the race would be my expectation.
Yeah, we can see a shot of the stroke. Lauren Wilkinson there from North Vancouver Boat Club. She's the blade's on the opposite side of the boat. As you look, it's on her left-hand side, and it's unusual to see a boat stroked on that side. Normally the blade is on the right-hand side of the boat, but through the first 500 metres, and that's a very handy lead to have in an 8s race. 1:31.02, lead of 2 seconds over the British, with America back in 4th place.
Absolutely, the Canadians, ever the bridesmaids to the US in this event, but it's good to see them really going out there and taking this race by the scruff of the neck. The evergreen Leslie Thompson-Wiley coxing this Canadian women's 8. She's back there in the coxswain seat. It's not many Canadian women's 8s over the last 20 years that we've seen without her coxing.
Yeah, is it 40 years? I mean, she has been around for a while. Sorry, Leslie, I know we know each other very well, but I think their coach, John Keogh, Canadian coach, is going to be so pleased with the way they're rowing. They've got a lot of time forward on the recovery. They don't look hurried or rushed, and I think that's a real sign of really good coaching. John Keogh took his crews out to Sydney. He wasn't too fussed about how they did there. They just got back on the water, but there you can see, well, number 5 are the American world champions. We keep emphasising that all these women have raced in the women's pairs. To them, they will want to win this race. It won't matter to them that they've got a race under their belts. They know that half the Canadian crew have raced already, but the Canadians have got almost clear water. There's the British we're riding with. Polly Swan, well, we're looking at the Donna Ettibeck there. There's Polly Swan with the sunglasses. She just looks across to her left to check the position relative to the Canadians. European champion through the K.
And as they come through the 1,000-metre mark, Canada leading by a massive margin over the US. This is not something we've seen happen very often. In 3rd place, we've got the British. They're really hanging in there with the Americans, but it's now they start to go. And this American team, their coxswain, she'd be telling them, you have to dig deep, you have to be brave. I know you've backed up, but now you have to be brave. It's going to take a massive turn of speed for them in this second half to get this Canadian 8 back.
They are moving. We haven't got the speed graphics yet, but Kathleen Snyder, the American cox, will be telling her crew that they are moving on the rest of the field, and that includes the Canadians. So perhaps not quite as much ground as they want, but these women race so hard in the National Training Centre in Princeton with their coach Tom Tahar. They go head to head against each other. 2 races, 2 2,000-metre races for them. something they're more than used to. And there we ride with the race leaders, the Canadian team, just going down the boat. Leslie Wiley-Thompson, the evergreen Cox that Sarah was talking about. But look at the bow of the Americans, and well might Megan Calmo in the bows look across, because, well, 600 metres to go, and the Americans are coming.
Look, I don't think they're going to get them. The electricity that must be going through those Canadian rowers right now. This is the first time they've done this. They will be one of the first teams, aside from the Australians in Sydney last year, to beat an American women's 8. So it's going to take something absolutely massive from that US women's 8 to turn this around and get that gold medal back. The Canadians will be just ecstatic, and I think having that energy, it takes you to another level. But here they come.
This is a charge. You know, when you know you're moving in an 8, and Caitlin Snyder, the American Cox, will be telling her crew it's a fantastic feeling, and the Canadians will have that edgy feeling. They've got 60 seconds of rowing for glory ahead of the Americans. The British have got their own match. You can see them in the centre of the screen against the Chinese in red for the bronze medal. I think China might be in bronze medal. To me, America are going to do this, Sarah.
Oh, it's coming down to the last 500. Is 500 metres enough? We know how hard it is to get an 8 up and going, but like you say, Martin, when the 8 has the momentum, it takes you all the way. And here they come, one seat at a time. The US, they might just get there. I think you're right, Martin. They have got this.
20 strokes to go, and the number 5 of the US women's 8 hit the front, and amazing. You can see the pain on the face of Caroline Lynn there. She's absolutely dying from Greensboro. The American there is leading her crew in the best way possible. 5 strokes to the line.
We saw the scream. She let out a scream. It must be burning like nothing else right now. Here they come. A canvas over Canada. Heartbreaking for Canada, but incredible from the US. What a turn of speed. What a brave, brave effort from those 8 women.
Oh, and Britain just take the contest with China for the bronze medal. But the reaction from Caitlin Snyder said it all. She was the only one with any energy. The American Cox threw her hands in the air, embraced the legs of her stroke woman, Caroline Lynn. The Americans over to our left are absolutely exhausted. Megan Musnicki there has let her blade go around to the side there. She's getting it back. Hugs there from Lauren Schmidt.
I'm just going to pause that for us. Great. So I always get chills when I see that video. So I hope you all enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite ones. One of my favorite races to watch, especially for Coxswains, just because you can really hear the Coxswains talking and hear them going through the race, and it's really awesome to see that. So, you know, in the follow-up to the race, this Coxswain toss is not from that race. The scenery looks similar, but you can see how high they get her. But Megan Calmo said, we had an amazing comeback race. It was so special thanks to our fearless coxswain, Caitlin Snyder. She was the only one that got us through the race. And you can hear that they said that there was a call for our teammates, and I could just feel the boat go. So, you know, you saw it, right? Like, I think everybody can see that when they got to about 700 meters left, they just sort of like all made a decision. You know, the coxswain, Caitlin Snyder, was able to just get the boat to go. And I think when we're talking about coaching coxswains or even becoming coxswains, that's really what the idealized version of this is how do we create that? How do we build that? And to me, it really comes down to one question. And that question is really, you know, is coxing subjective or objective? And what are the implications of that for how we teach coxswains? So you guys can throw it in the chat real quick, but let's see, like, you know, is coxing objective or subjective? What do we think? So subjective meaning, you know, is it something that we just sort of like feel and it is, and it, you know, just we go about doing it, or is it objective? We can put cold, hard data onto it. No right or wrong answers here, guys. John Neer, my guy. Yup. So yeah, it's a combo of both. Exactly, John. So it's a combo of both. It's not one or the other. And there are lots of implications to how we teach coxswains because it's both. And same question for rowers, is it subjective or objective? And really, you know, I think we all know it's both. Both of these things are both subjective and objective. There's a certain feeling you get when you're in an 8 or a 4 or even a double, and you're just, you know, you're one with the crew and you're one with the boat, and the 8 fastest people don't always make the fastest 8. Just like as a coxswain, you know, there's this certain quality that the best coxswains have that, you know, they work on and hone, and that's a subjective feeling, but then there's objectiveness to it. You know, there are faster rowers. You know, there is a difference between someone who, you know, has a 10-minute 2K and someone who can do it in 5:40. So, you know, there are implications of this as we go through teaching rowers. So, you know, by approaching parts of coxing as objective skills, we can begin to help coxswains measure their improvement and motivate towards becoming better coxswains. But if we acknowledge that some parts are subjective, we leave room for what we talked about earlier, which is just that empathetic nature of getting the most out of their teammates. And so how do we do this? We just work on how we improve communication as coaches to coxswains, and we work on how we give feedback. So we give feedback in a bunch of different ways and try and relate to the coxswains as if they were rowers and just try and meet them on their level. So, and you guys can keep throwing questions up in the Q&A if you guys want as we go through here. I'll get to them sort of through the presentation. I'm just periodically looking up there, and if I see questions that sort of relate well to what we're talking about, I'll grab them. But before we get into how we give feedback, I want to go through this coxing pyramid, which is one of the most important things I think I'm going to talk about today. And it's sort of, you know, what comes first when it comes to coxing. And we're going to talk about some more advanced stuff. I like to use a lot of data when I'm talking about coaching coxswains and when I am coaching coxswains. But before we get to any of that, it's really important that we talk about safety of athletes and equipment and steering, because if you can't do those two things at the bottom of the pyramid, that's so much of what the role entails. Beyond that, once you sort of get through those two things, you know, I think one person said, you know, there's so many inputs to coxing. That's one of the challenges, you know, getting the coxswains to just steer straight and not hit things. You know, these are really important things that are sort of the things that you need to take for granted. And when we threw up that quote at the beginning, you know, the best coxswain goes unnoticed. That's really what people are talking about, is just getting your basics down before we move on to sort of how we run a practice, how we motivate our athletes, and then sort of the tactical nature of coxing. So just making sure, you know, as coaches, we want to make sure that we're scaffolding. We're not building things on top of things that aren't already built. So it's silly to talk to a coxswain who's just starting out about tactics when they can't even run an effective practice. They can't steer yet. You know, all those things are things they need to get feedback on first. So I like the memes, but real-time feedback is critical. It's really something you need to start with novice coxswains doing, because so many coxswains, they're in that hard leadership role, and if they can't accept criticism from the coxswain seat, then, you know, they really struggle for the rest of their time, you know, both when they move up to varsity at the high school level, but then, you know, collegiately and internationally. Accepting feedback is huge to being a good coxswain, and that's a skill. That's something that we need to work on all the time. So there's an art to that as a coach too, and providing the proper way to give feedback, and we're going to get into that in a second. But as coxswains, we really need to make sure that we're working on our skill of accepting feedback and accepting constructive criticism. So the first thing that I want to think about is situational drilling. So we're going to watch a video here in a second, and this is from the Head of the Charles. I believe it's 2002. I'm going to give you a throwback race, and I believe it's the Youth 8s, one of the most challenging races, I think, for the Head of the Charles, and one of the most challenging races to Cox. And the particular part of the race, we're going to be watching a race that starts, maybe you can see my mouse, but Western Ave Bridge here. We're watching from Western Ave Bridge as we approach the hard Weeks turn, which is a hard starboard pressure turn. The boat has to turn over to the port side with starboard pressure and a lot of rudder and a lot of control. And I want to sort of like see what happens here, or watch the coxswains. We'll play it through for you guys, and then sort of analyze it a little bit after. So thank you to Row2K for this awesome video. So what I want you guys, I know someone said they couldn't hear me over the video, but pay specific attention to this darker boat here in the near ground as we come through this video. Oh, God.
They can't turn.
Oh, they get it.
We can pause it there. It gets a little iffy after that. But we're going to stay on this slide for a second so I can talk that through with you guys. I'll actually quickly just go up to right there. So you can see what happened was the darker boat in the foreground, they actually end up catching a little bit of a crab, but the two boats that were passing that darker boat end up not really thinking about the turn, not really planning out the turn ahead of time, and not really thinking about where they're going, just really focused on, you know, beating the other boat that's next to them. And this darker boat that ends up catching the crab, you know, the coxswain there, maybe he or she could have intentionally slowed down. That would have been, in my preference, the better way to have done this. But you sort of see three boats coming up. You see what's about to happen. You see, you know, this is the beginning of the video. You see this darker boat that I told us to watch here. And, you know, that you see that they're being passed by these other two boats. You know, at that point, that coxswain needs to be thinking, you know, what is going to happen at the bridge? And we're lucky enough to be on the Charles every day. The crews that I coach at Riverside Boat Club, about, you know, 1,500 meters downstream of this spot. But anyone can go out and do this kind of situational awareness drilling, especially for head racing. So, you know, Weeks Bridge is around 30 meters apart. You can take two buoys and stick them in your body of water if you have that space. And then, you know, I will all the time in the lead up to head of the Charles run 3 or 4 boats up to Weeks Bridge carefully. Ideally for anyone who's a Charles crew on here or has a busy body of water, you pick some time of the day that's not busy so that you can really carefully do this and not cause a safety issue. But, you know, have them go up to the bridge, and I'll do something where I'll tell, you know, let's second 8. Okay, it's your job to rate at a 45, and I'll cap the first 8 that's going to race head of the Charles. I'll cap them at, you know, 32, 34 and say, you know, you have to think about this is the same pacing as you would do for a head race. And the second 8 just sort of doesn't back off and doesn't back down. And the coxswain in the first 8 really has to think about, you know, what line they're going to take and where they're going to go, and if they should back off or try and take a 10. And we'll do this, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 times, just going through with the second boat having faster or slower speeds, with different leads with the slower boat, different gaps back to the fast boat with sometimes 3 or 4 boats, lots of different situations, and let the coxswain or the bow seat, if you're a sculler, think about where they are, how fast their boat is moving. It's the same thing as being, you know, on a highway, really, and just thinking about what's going to happen before it happens, and play out situations in your head and think about what's the most advantageous thing to do. And we'll usually put them on video, but even real time, just give the coxswains an idea of, you know, hey, I would have done this in this situation. Or even for the first 1 or 2 loops through a situation like this, tell the coxswain, you know, hey, do this now. Hey, do this now, with a coxswain who's a little bit newer. So that's the first way we do real-time feedback, but there are lots more ideas. So one thing that we do a lot of is called stump the coxswain. So I'll tell the boat, okay, you know, today we're doing 4 by 15 minutes at an 18. And in the 3rd minute of the second piece, I want you guys to start to miss water. And I tell them to do it sort of like gradually and not too crazily, but, you know, to do that. And then I'll tell the coxswains, okay, at some point in today's practice, I've told the rowers that I want them to make an intentional mistake. And when you see the intentional mistake made, I want you to raise your hand up and say, you know, I'm trying to be stumped right now, and make a call to fix it. And so they know that it's coming, but there's an intentional thing that they can use to, you know, work on a call, or to know when something's different, and to make sure that they're paying attention, and to make sure they practice certain calls for certain technical things. And then, I'm always looking, are they actually calling the rates? Are they actually running the workout? And there's a gentle way to do that. I think some coaches tend to get frustrated. It's important to remember that, as coaches, I really encourage coaches one day over winter training, try and time, your rowers and call rates and do it all. It's very hard to do and still be coaching and then think about driving a boat while you're doing all of that. So, just trying to make that second nature to them, trying to help them out, calling it, even just gently saying, okay, we're at a 20 now, we're at a 22 now, calling the rates for the boat occasionally if you just to remind the coxswain that that's where we're going to be. And then I'll also coach through the coxswain. So instead of me saying, hey, these catches are really, really bad. The releases are really awful. Let's try and work on them. Let's try and clean this up. I'll say, hey, coxswain, the releases are a little bit messy here. Why don't we make a call for them? Or during this drill, let's make sure that the crew is focusing on tapping down before the handle comes into their body. And, one thing that really helps with my coxswains when I'm working with some is hand signaling. So even if it's just, hey, slow down, go a little bit this way, go a little bit that way, or like, that's going well, or, I'll develop, the longer I work with the same coxswains, the more hand signals will sort of add to our rotation. But just having a few basics goes a long way, and understanding that, having a way to give coxswains feedback without necessarily having to talk over them or having to talk to the crew. It's a nice way to tell them, hey, that was good. Or, we'll even I like to have coxswains sometimes weave so that we keep a slower boat with a faster boat. So if the faster boat is on the inside of the turn, I'll just hold up my hands and go, weave, guys. And they know, the faster boat should take a pause, drop back behind the slower boat, move to the outside of the turn, and get and stay on the outside of the turn with the faster boat. So we keep our crews together, and I can coach two boats, a little tighter that way. And then, the really nice thing to do with real-time feedback is to have the coxswains working and talking together. So many times the Charles is a busy body of water that I'm on a lot, and I see coxswains from the same team that don't talk to each other. Their head is straight forward. They're focused on what's going on in their boat, and they don't talk to each other at all. And then you see, the really, really good coxswains, particularly I would say my favorite coxswains on the river are some of the BU lightweight women coxswains. They're talking constantly to each other, and they're saying, hey, can I get a little bit more space to port? Hey, my point is here. I'm this far through the workout. They're just chatting with each other all through practice, and they have a really good sort of internal structure for how they deal with making sure everyone is doing the right thing and steering well and running the workout well. It's really nice versus, I hear other coxswains on the river and all throughout the rowing world just shout at their teammate, yield, get over, really aggressive terminology. So
Mark, if I can jump into, there's a question
yeah.
just on something you just said, but if you could
Yep.
give some examples on the hand signals that you use.
Yeah, so I gave a bunch, but weave, slow down, that's going well, thumbs up. I don't know if you guys can still see me. I think you can, right? So thumbs up. For weave, I put my hands together and I just kind of make a weaving motion. Slow down, I'll use, what are some of the other ones? Sometimes I'll just do sort of like a blade going into the water for a catch, or on the other side of my hand, releases, just popping the blade out for, hey, releases need to work a little bit cleaner. Or sometimes I'll be sitting in the launch and do this. I don't know if you guys can see, I'm making like a hand, my head is going forward, like the coxswain is being checked. Like, hey, can you feel that the catches are going in late and you're getting thrown on the drive? Or just, this is sort of like slow down into the front stops. Every boat is a little bit different. Every coxswain that I talk to is a little bit different and what makes sense to them. So I sort of work with them to get some hand signals that they sort of know, so I can see something from the launch. And instead of having to yell out, oh, I see this going on, let's fix it, I can tell the coxswain what's going on from the launch without the rowers even having to hear it. And it really creates this huge amount of buy-in from the rowers to the coxswain, because, I can then say 2 strokes later, 3 strokes later, hey guys, let's work on catches here, and pretend like I didn't even hear the coxswain. And all the rowers are like, whoa, we were already working on that. And they get really like, oh, this coxswain is so good. When in reality, it's just really good communication between the coxswain seat and the launch, going back and forth, both ways. So it's just, the hand signals are a nice way, because the rowers are not looking out of the boat, but the coxswains are looking out of the boat so much that if I'm riding alongside, I can just make a quick hand motion when we get eye contact, and I encourage them to like make eye contact. And they have some hand signals too that they sometimes use back to me of like, you know, this is not going well. Like, you know, can we try something new? Or even to each other, like they'll be like, hey, I need this lane, and they'll sort of like motion over to their side and be able to keep talking through that. So those are some of the hand signals that I use. Yeah, signal for stop. Thanks, John. Signal for stop, you know, just this or even this are really, really good. So that's some of the real-time feedback that we'll do. And then I want to talk about Coxswain data. So I'm going to talk a lot about speed coaches here and how we use real-time speed coach data to help our Coxswains and give them real-time feedback. I'm going to talk a little bit about post-row feedback and the speed coach, but I want to make sure that everyone knows, like, I'm going to get through this in a little bit and make sure that everyone knows you don't have to have a speed coach, and give you some ideas for what you could do if you didn't have a speed coach in terms of how to give yourself some feedback on what's going on with some data and with some, you know, back and forth between what's going on in the boat. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to watch a video here. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here, but this is from the Garmin Verb camera. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but it's from a Garmin Verb, and this crew is going around a big turn. You can see on the little thing on the right-hand side, and I'm going to mute her. Actually, you don't really need to hear the coxswain. Actually, what I want you guys focused on is looking at the turn, and then this 1,000-meter split up here. You can see right now it's at a 418. As we come around the turn, typical pace for this boat when I was coaching them was around a 330 to 350 1K split for a straightaway. And you'll see that as we get further and further around the turn, you can see right now we're 4 minutes, 420s. And we'll see as we get further and further around the apex of the turn, we'll see it go up to 5 minutes. We just saw 1 5 minute, more 5 minutes, you know, high 4s. And then as we come off the turn, you can see we're starting to come off the turn now. She's still got a little bit more turning to do. We'll get back to that 330s, you know, 340s kind of speed for this little piece that we're doing. And it'll get much, much faster. So, you know, one thing that we can use Speed Coach for is really understanding how we're steering and what the most effective line through a course is. So it's really, you know, steering, I think so many people say this, but it really cannot be understated. Steering is the art of braking. So it, you know, if you're slowing down, if you're getting through the course and it's and you're seeing the splits go up and up and up as you're steering, you really need to think like, you know, is this line that I'm taking really effective? It may be the shortest line, but I'm slowing down the boat by having to steer so hard onto it that it may not necessarily be the most effective line. So using the Speed Coach to be able to see that is really, really important. You can also use it if you're on a body of water. You know, for some of you from Massachusetts, the Merrimack River in Lowell, you know, is a good example of this. The current is very, very fast there. And, you know, when you're coming down for some of their head races in Lowell or on other high volume, high current bodies of water, you know, the fastest line may not be the fastest line. Your shortest line may not be the fastest line. It may be where the current's the fastest. So using the Speed Coach to tell when you're coming in and out of the current is very helpful too. But, you know, the other thing we can do is use our Speed Coach or use our sort of like markers along the river to sort of like gauge distance on a set course. So we're going to talk about some of the Head of the Charles course time trials that we did back in fall of 2018. We do this every single fall, just have the data on hand from 2018. But, you know, we can see here that we did time trials throughout the fall. The first one we did on September 1st, 15th, 30th, basically one every 2 weeks. And you can see that, you know, there's not too much difference in split over here, except for this 2301. These are all pretty similar splits, actually, in terms of how fast the boat is going. But if you look at 4912 versus 4,738, that's like a pretty large distance. I mean, we're talking, you know, over 170 meters there. And when we're talking about that much distance, if you look at, this was the women's single in 2017 leading into fall 2018, or sorry, I think I have my dates wrong. These are all 2018 dates. But if you look at these at the race results, the difference of like 2250 to 2132, that's the difference between like not qualifying your single for the next year and finishing third. So, you know, it's just really shows the point of like, you know, how important that steering is. And in terms of real time, you know, you can go through and be like, okay, at this point in the race, I need to have done this number of meters. And you can use Google Maps pedometer, you can just Google that, Google Maps pedometer, it comes up and it tells you, like as you pass these landmarks, you should have this number of meters. You can just lay the course out and know, like when I come up to Riverside, I need to be, 1,200 meters in, or, if I've done 1,400 meters at that point, then it's really going to be a struggle for me to do well because I'm rowing that extra 200 meters, taking the turn super wide for the Head of the Charles course. But whatever your race course is, you can just put it into the pedometer and find out how long it is and where the landmarks are along the river and how many meters you should be on your speed coach at that point or you can use time too, like you can see the time go, hopefully you're on time as you're coming into those points. Other thing we can do with speed coach is look at distance per stroke. So I have this boat in here that is not getting a lot of distance per stroke, but distance per stroke is, you can cue it up on the speed coach by just going on the up and down arrows if you haven't done it before, but it's really a really big telltale sign of a bunch of things. And obviously the more distance you're getting per stroke, the more efficiently you're rowing pretty much. Yes, of course you can row harder at the same rate and that brings the distance per stroke up. But if you can keep the pressure the same and get more distance per stroke, typically that means you're going more efficiently. So, we can see this boat here and see that it's just far more effective, far more distance per stroke. They're going through the whole screen. This is the GB Men's 4 from 2016 Olympics that won quite good for there, that gets their catches in quite a bit cleaner and gets way more distance on each stroke than that 8 that we were looking at previously. But you can use distance per stroke for so many different things, whether it's catches, whether it's releases, whether it's ratio and controlling the slide, timing, and a really nice way to call it is, hey, I'm getting 9.5 meters per stroke in 2 strokes. Let's, get our catches in and see if we can push that to over 10 meters per stroke. And, that's such a nice call to make because not only are you, referring to something that's really objective, distance per stroke, but you're also giving them a goal. You're giving them a constructive way of thinking about what they're doing and being able to build on what they're trying to do in the boat. And then, you have a win condition, you have a, success. And then not only that, you have a win condition going forward. 2 minutes later, you can see that the distance per stroke has gone down and you can say, hey, okay, maybe it's catches, but maybe it's something else, but let's try and fix it again. And if you don't have the speed coach, there's a lot of different ways of figuring this out. So you can take this table here and you can see like for the given speed of your boat and what rate, what the distance per stroke might be for race pace. And this is really easy to calculate out to just, on your course, how many, how far do you need to go to complete it at a certain rate, how much time per stroke. And then, so let's say you want to rate the Head of the Charles at a 32, for example, how far the Head of the Charles is typically 4,700 meters and you want to finish it in 22 minutes, then, you just take 22 minutes, see how many strokes you're going to take in that time. And then you can see how far you need to travel per stroke to accomplish it in 22 minutes or, 18 minutes or whatever your time is. And then, if that's your goal is to hit that particular distance per stroke, then you can just take some electrical tape and you can put it a certain number of meters down your bow or down your stern even, and you can see, how far you're going per stroke and see how far you're pushing the puddles away and see where that is. You can also take a little bit of copper tubing or rubber tubing and put it in your stern. That's a really nice way. If you're not familiar with that, basically all it is a little tube that you take and you stick part of the tube in the water and then you bend the tube up. And you point it in the direction of the boat that the boat's traveling. So you can put it right on one side of the coxswain seat if you want, and it makes a little fountain. So it shoots the water that's going by the boat up into the air and it'll come right above the gunnel, maybe an inch or 2 above the gunnel. And, if they take a bad catch or, the boat's not running out well, or if they're rushing the slide, you'll see that difference in how much water is coming through the little tube. And you'll see, how much and for how long it stops in between strokes. And that's another nice way of you don't have the speed coach figuring out just what sort of distance per stroke you're getting or how smoothly the boat is running out in between strokes. Before we get into, post-row data review, I want to talk about some of the pitfalls of technology. So I don't know how many people have seen this video. It's one of my favorite kind of funny videos, but I've had a coxswain who pretty much did exactly this. I was able to steer them off course of the pylon here, but if you watch it, this coxswain is clearly looking down at something, right at something really clearly. Let's see what's in there. So it's kind of a joke, but in all seriousness, you know, when we're looking at some of this technology, especially, this is a nice segue into, you know, real-time feedback to post row. As we're looking at some of this technology, I once had a coxswain who just, you know, was staring down at the speed coach, and she's got her hands on both steering cables on the sides, both steering toggles, and she's holding on to them, but she's, you know, she's just reading splits. She's going 155, 157, 158, and she's not looking up. And I'm like, look up, look up. And all of a sudden she realizes that she's steering right at one of these pylons. And, you know, we got her back on course. But, you know, it's important as a coach, important as a coxswain, to not get too involved in this data and really not lose sight of sort of the big picture of what's going on, you know, getting really dug into what's going on. So post-row feedback is what we're going to talk about next. If there are any questions on real-time feedback, happy to see those in the chat. Wendy, I've got your question there, and I'll get to it in a second, kind of more towards the end. But post-row feedback is really useful, and it allows us to analyze coxing, but it's really important that, you know, we really are focused on the real-time feedback. That's so beneficial because it just gives us a really tight feedback loop for our coxswains, and gives us the ability to go through and just, you know, figure out what's going on really, really quickly and easily. But there are some things with post-row feedback that enables us to sort of take deep dives into what we're doing and really improve on some pretty critical things. So when we're talking about post-row feedback, there's lots of ways to do it. There's sort of feedback post-piece, rowers to coxswains and coxswains to rowers. So what I'll typically do with that is make sure that it doesn't become sort of just like a butcher fest of everyone breaking things down. I'll assign, you know, stern fore or bow fore to be, and include the coxswain in stern fore, and just say, you know, stern fore, what's, you know, you guys are going to be the positive Pete today, and you're going to say one thing that's going really, really well in the boat. And, you know, bow fore, you're going to be negative Nancy's, and you're going to say, you know, one bad thing that's going on in the boat. You can also do it. Another nice way to do it is to go pair by pair. So, you know, the stroke seat for the coxswain, and then work through, and then stroke seat can also do 7-seat. And each person says one thing about their pair partner that they're doing well, and one thing that they're doing not so well. And you don't have to go through the whole boat. You can just go through, you know, coxswain stroke seat and stroke seat 7-seat and 7-seat stroke for the first piece. And then you do your next, you know, 10 or 15 or whatever minute steady state piece, and then 20-minute steady state piece, whatever you want to do, and then break it down again, and go pair by each time you stop, just, you know, one pair having a chat about what's going well and what's not going well. And it gives them an opportunity to really pay attention to what they're doing and have sort of something that they're working on. But also for the coxswains, it helps them really dig into, you know, a feedback loop that's pretty good, pretty fast, and pretty peer reviewed. So it's really nice. The other thing that's really huge is just, you know, hopefully everybody is blessed enough to have more coxswains than boats, because I think that's a really nice way for coxswains to learn, is to spend time in the launch and to see what you're seeing from the launch. And, you know, a lot of the time it's really helpful for coxswains, especially younger, newer coxswains, to ride along in the launch, not only seeing what you're seeing technically, not only seeing what you're seeing from a rowing standpoint, but also to say, like, oh, you know, that situation where I got frustrated last week, well, there's 3 more situations that happened in the same practice, and you can see it play out and be just as frustrated. And, you know, how can we work through this? And, you know, yes, it's obviously frustrating when we make mistakes, but how can we work through this and have it be positive? A lot of times it's great to have talks post row. Rowers are putting away oars or stretching, you know, have some time for the coach and the coxswain to meet and to talk through what's going on. Learning to row is really so critical for coxswains. You know, if you learn how to row, especially the single, you gain such an understanding, and you grasp this idea of, you know, understanding how the mechanics of rowing work and how it all sort of like gets put together. And then, you know, having coxswains mentor each other, you know, once a week meeting and discuss, you know, what did we do well this week at practice? How can we work better as a group at practice? How can we facilitate having a better team dynamic? You know, having better movement through practice? How can we facilitate safer practices? You know, just grading themselves on how the week went is really a nice way to sort of like end the week. I usually, you know, on a bigger team, I usually meet with my captains at the end of the week, and my coxswains. Can be the same meeting, can be 2 different meetings, but, you know, nice way to just go over how the week went and everything that went down. In terms of data, and I know I'm running tight on time here, I want to give us plenty of time for questions, so I'm going to kind of power through these last few slides. But post data, we can, you know, everybody's speed coach, and even these Garmin verbs, you can see this is another example of the Garmin verb camera that gives you all the GPS data alongside it. And this even gives you heart rate data in the bottom right-hand corner. But you can evaluate the effectiveness of your decisions and calls. So if you download the data from your NK Speed Coach, you can pair that to your voice recorder and see exactly how much faster the boat got, exactly what happened, you know, at the end of, you know, when you made that call or made that steering decision. So that's a really nice way to look at it. And you can also evaluate steering, you know, like you can see the line that you took with the Garmin Verb, or even with the Speed Coach, you can download the .fit file off your Speed Coach and it gives you this overlay on a map. If anyone's curious about that, feel free to send me an email, and you can get an idea for what course you're taking and where the course that you wanted to take, you know, what was and where you maybe were off that course. I think I'm going to get to that slide here in a second. Yep. So this is in Lowell, Massachusetts, and this is Textile River Regatta, which hasn't been run. Actually, it was run this past year, but before that hadn't been run for a couple of years. And the blue line, these are both my crews. The dark blue line at the bottom, that was the second year that we were in the race, and the light blue line was the first year that we were in the race. And the light blue line, we finished first. It was a great race. It was our first time winning that race in quite a bit. And the dark blue line was the next year with a different coxswain, and we finished second by, I believe it was 0.2 or 0.3 seconds. And you know, I think it's really important when you're looking at this data to not get data eyes, not get too locked in on this, right? You can see that obviously the coxswain the second year was a little bit, you know, made a little bit of a mistake here, but that 0.2 seconds could have very easily come from, you know, being a little bit fitter, could have come from, you know, frankly, even, you know, how much water they were carrying at the beginning of the race. Not that we need to dump out our water, but there's so many little things that could have happened, you know, what you ate for breakfast the morning of, you know, that could have been responsible for this. But it's a nice way for the coxswain to see, you know, okay, let's compare all your lines and see, you know, what's going on and where we can gain speed. And the coxswain was the same the following year, and actually was able to get inside of this teal line. And when I came into the boathouse the next year, we won the race again the following year. And then I came into the boathouse and showed the coxswain his line from the next year, and it was inside this sort of teal light blue line here. And he was just so happy, so exuberant. He was like, oh, like, yeah, I knew I crushed the course, but it's great to see it, you know, and see it light up that way. So bunch of stuff here down at the bottom. GPS visualizer lets you overlay these tracks, lets you overlay multiple tracks on top of each other. Fit Track View lets you view one track, and then Rosen and All is a website that lets you visualize Speed Coach data as well, and lets you put a lot more data into it and see a lot more like linking rate to the map and things like that. So a lot of cool tools that you can use down there. Again, just more steering. This is on a 2K. Typically what I'll do when I'm talking to coxswains about steering 2Ks is just, you know, really trying to eliminate any of these little divots here in the straight line. So what I'll do is I'll take a piece of paper, throw this graph on my computer screen, throw the map on the computer screen, and then put up a piece of paper or ruler along the line. We look at any points in the line where, you know, we deviated from a straight course and see if we can correct those for the future. And then the last thing, I think this is the last thing that the last thing that we're going to talk about with post-row data review is just voice recorders. So I'll have them go through and do, you know, this sort of chart here with 0 through 500. You can break it up into 250s, thousands, you know, whatever makes sense for the length of the race and what you're looking to see, but have them go through and look at their recordings of themselves. I think it's really critical that every coxswain have a good data recorder and goes through and thinks about what they're saying in the boat. And, you know, it's for each 500 of a 2K, I'll say, you know, did you update what your rate was? And did you update what, you know, how far into the race you were, time you were? And that we start with these two columns. And then as we get through, I expect to be able to fill out this whole chart. So like, you know, basic coxswains, you know, they can update the boat every 500 meters on rate. They can say, you know, we're 1 minute into a 7-minute race. But they might not be able to know what the original focus was or what they're struggling with or doing well on until they've sort of gone through this process a few different times. And then they sort of gain this ability to multitask better, to, you know, break down what they're saying in the moment better. And they sort of gain this ability to add these columns in as they go through doing this. And the other thing we'll do is like, you know, take other people's recordings that we find on YouTube or on the internet somewhere and do the same process with those and sort of get a feeling for the race and what might be happening and what we like about the recording and what we don't like about the recording. And that's a really nice thing to do over the winter. So I'm going to blaze through selecting coxswains, but when it comes to, the coxswains 2K, we talked about objectiveness when we're talking about coxswains and subjectiveness. But when it comes to sort of the objective, selecting coxswains, to me, steering is really the 2K. They really need to be able to steer a straight course. They really need to be able to get their boat around the head race in as few meters as possible. Going back to that slide I showed you where, we did head of the Charles time trials and for meters, there's obviously a huge difference if your coxswain can put the head of the Charles course in 4,500 meters versus 4,900 meters. 400 meters, you think 400 meters is 2 minutes. That's just a huge difference in your cruise capability to win a race. So that's really the first thing. But in terms of subjective feedback and how we select coxswains, we do coxswain evaluations. I like to keep them simple and short, 4 to 5 ranked questions, and then a section for comments, something like rank this coxswain's ability to keep the rower's boat safe. The reason why to keep it short and to leave a section for comments is it allows for some open-endedness to it, but it also allows for repetition. So really like to see at least twice a season or at least 3 times a year for evaluations, because we really need to be helping coxswains set goals. They need to be able to say, by the end of the season, I want my safety score to go up from 3 to 4.5 out of 5. And, when you're doing it, encourage the rowers to evaluate honestly, constructively, and fairly, just like they would, like to be evaluated on their technical mistakes and improvements. You want them to be thinking about this the same way for their coxswains. And then review and filter evaluation results. Some of the information won't be useful. You want to definitely try and push a narrative for your coxswains and summarize results for them. I usually don't let my coxswains see the results straightforward. I'll let them see like averages of what everyone said. And then the comments, I say, hey, I'm going to filter these comments a little bit for you. I give you verbatim what they said, but I also try and extract a little bit of common thread through the comments for them. And then in terms of seat racing coxswains, it should be done with the potential lineup versus a control boat that usually starts a distance up. Ideally, that distance is the same every single piece. Keep 1 coxswain in the launch and do 4 pieces. This is sort of like my go-to best practices for seat racing coxswains. Do 4 pieces and switch after piece 1 and 3. Average the times, note positions relative to the control boat, and take meters. Take the number of meters you covered / courses on speed coaches, and try to explain the results clearly. And I usually go to the seat race sort of if things aren't really, really clear. And then, even if it's too close to call, then I try and, really offer constructive criticism and be objective and transparent with the process. But, usually I start with sort of like, what are your steering look like on a day-to-day basis? And then what are your evaluations look like? And then if I have a couple coxswains who are tight, then we'll do some seat racing in this format. And we do it in this format so that, we can look at it in the potential lineup, because there is a sense of like certain coxswains mesh better with certain athletes. And then, it's important to take the average times, but also take the meters, because, if one coxswain is steering better, but the other boat goes faster, then it's with the other coxswain in it, then it's important to sort of like have all the coxswains and rowers understand that and understand the trade-offs. Again, we just want to give you a few takeaways here to finish up, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. But have coxswain, one of the winter takeaways that I like to do is have coxswains review video with the audio muted, and ask them to write down a few things they see going wrong with the boat, and see if there's a turning point in the race. And then we turn the audio back on, and we look at this table here. So we say, basically, with it muted, what's the estimated rate? What rate do you think the boat is at? What are your observations? And what calls would you make in that type of situation? And then we rewatch the video with the audio on, and we see the calls that they actually made. And then we talk about the different points. Really recommend Abingdon versus Belmont Hill. Really, really good race from Henley Royal in 2009 that I would highly recommend. It's very easy to find on YouTube for this, but it has the coxswain video. Also, another good recommendation is the and it has good video with just like one other boat, which is really, really nice. If you want more boats, I would say maybe like the US men's U23-8 from 2018 is also on YouTube somewhere, with the coxswain video overlaid onto the race video, so you can mute it and see all the boats. You don't want to use like a headshot camera from a coxswain for this, where you can't see the whole race play out. And then another nice good takeaway here, you can see sort of like a bunch of different rowers here from Crash Bees with a bunch of different faces on them. But I like to have coxswains face the ergs and act so that they can just see the rowers' faces. They can't see what splits are on the screens, and ask them to predict who is going the fastest or furthest away from their targets on a piece day. So, I'll say, this rower, who do you think is going further away from 2K on like a 4x1K workout, and have them sort of then turn around and look at the erg screens, and it helps them to learn cues for fatigue versus like what's efficient rowing. Because, oftentimes with some athletes, they really show the fatigue, and that's important to realize, but other times, they're just rowing efficiently and they might be further under the split, and it really teaches them some lessons about each rower and what each rower looks like and how to sort of empathize with them when they're in those moments. Also like to have my coxswains do video analysis of rowers with supervision. So I asked them to do a voiceover of one of their teammates rowing, just queue up your video on your phone and just as you're recording, just talk about some things. And then they send the video to me. And if I like it, I might, add a couple comments here and there in text. And then email it to the rower. And it really helps them, helps everyone feel sort of like all on the same page and really bought into how everyone's improving. We also every winter form the committee to fix erg technique, and we'll convene it pretty early in the winter, and we'll have each athlete, their name on a piece of paper, and 1 or 2 or 3 things that